Putin Bad News Putin hurries to call a meeting to discuss currency controls amid economic uncertainty. The latest indicator that Russia's war in Ukraine is damaging its own economy is reports that Vladimir Putin called an emergency meeting to discuss state currency controls. Two sources familiar with the situation told the Financial Times that Mr. Putin was expected to hear proposals from his finance ministry yesterday that would require exporters to demand a portion of their foreign earnings in rubles. Since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, this proposal for tighter currency controls is the first of its kind to be discussed in the Kremlin. The Russian ruble has been one of the worst-performing currencies in recent months, prompting the country's central bank to take drastic measures, such as an unprecedented interest rate hike of 3.5%. Ukrainian forces yesterday retook the village of Urozhainy in the southeast from Russian troops, but they warned that the situation in the northeast was worsening due to Russian counterattacks. As Ukrainian troops advance through heavily mined Russian defensive lines, Urozhainy is the first village recaptured by Kyiv's forces since July 27. Moscow's full-scale war is having an effect on the Russian economy, and Vladimir Putin was expected to speak to policymakers yesterday about currency controls as the ruble continued to slide despite an extraordinary 3.5 percentage point hike in interest rates. Two sources familiar with the situation told the Financial Times that the Russian president was expected to hear proposals from the finance ministry to require exporters to convert some of the country's foreign earnings into rubles. According to the newspapers, the Russian finance ministry has proposed a law that would force exporters to convert as much as 80% of their foreign currency earnings into rubles within 90 days of delivery. It also sought to cut off government subsidies to businesses that refused to comply. Since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine began in February of last year, this is the first such proposal on increased currency control to be debated in the Kremlin. Russia's central bank has intervened in recent months as the ruble has become one of the world's worst-performing currencies. According to Janis Kluge, an expert on the Russian economy at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs, the devaluation of the ruble is not very welcome in the Kremlin. This is the closest we came to a real economic problem since the start of the war, he said, indicating that the situation was dire but not a full-blown crisis. Far worse chaos ensued at the outset of sanctions, but since then, the ruble's decline is the first time that something seems to be not so much under control, he said. The United States has called on Russia to immediately resume the grain deal after Russia's attacks on Ukraine's grain infrastructure. After reports yesterday from Ukraine said Russia had attacked its grain storage facilities overnight, State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel told reporters that Russian President Vladimir Putin does not care about global food security. According to a spokesperson for the Ukrainian Air Force, the country's F-16 fighter jets will be inoperable this fall and winter as Russia continues its invasion. A spokesperson for the Ukrainian government, Yuri Inat, said during a joint telethon broadcast by Ukrainian channels that it was already obvious that the country could not defend itself with F-16 fighter jets this fall and winter. Mr. Inat confirmed Kyiv's awareness of delays in receiving the warplanes it has been seeking from its Western allies when he said, "We had big hopes for this plane, that it will become part of air defense, able to protect us from Russia's missiles and drones terrorism." Earlier in August, Mr. Zelensky announced that Ukrainian pilots would begin F-16 training this month and that the delivery and combat use of F-16s by our pilots should take place as soon as possible. Mr. Zelensky predicted that Russia's invasion would end in defeat if advanced military aircraft were supplied to the war-torn country. A former NATO commander has claimed that the West has been slow to deliver on its promise to provide F-16s to Ukrainian pilots because its allies are afraid of further antagonizing Russia and risking a nuclear showdown.